Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.
Well, there are some developments planned for our beautiful Point Perrin, but not everybody is happy about it. Melissa Gurney has more.
Emotions are at their peak today in the wake of the Environmental Protection Authority, EPA, a body meant to protect and conserve our WA environment, having granted recommended approval for developer Cedar Woods to go ahead with their huge proposal.
So what's your position on the proposed development at Point Perrin, as in the inland marina and canal housing? It's in your local electorate as well as your residents. Is it a good or bad thing for Rockingham?
Well, it is in my electorate. The EPA has made a ruling on it. The Minister will now make a decision on whether or not it's approved. I expect the Minister will approve it. At the end of the day, it needs to have the highest environmental standards, but the EPA has had a look at all the environmental issues and I accept their judgment.
Let's say Point Perrin!
Several action groups conducted a peaceful protest today outside the offices of developer Cedar Woods in West Perth and marched to the steps of WA Parliament House, where they presented over 8,000 original signature strong petition to Green Senator Lynn McLaren.
My particular concern in this proposal is the coastal processes. They're dredging. It is basically highly unusual in Australia to have a canal development in this day and age because of the impact on the surrounding coastal ecosystems.
This area also sits within a regional park. It's closely associated with threatened ecological communities. It's associated with important marine assets that will be disturbed by these activities, and potentially the marine environment is contaminated.
It's just essentially a land grab that they're trying to paint as community infrastructure or community facility when there's another location that's already been approved.
A development like this, if it's done properly and it minimises environmental harm and also ensures maximum local employment, does have the opportunity of providing local jobs for people and also a range of social opportunities. But it has to be done right. We've seen bad examples in the past. My view is that a development like this needs to be managed very carefully, and if it's done right, it can be a benefit.
Certainly we all want this to go ahead and protect the environmental values, but it's important to note the project is actually at Mangles Bay. It won't impact Cape Perrin to the south, and there are a lot of conditions imposed to ensure that the job is done thoroughly and properly.
EPA Chairman Paul Vogel released a 138-page report that recommended the proposal by Cedar Woods and Landcorp be given the green light by WA Environment Minister Albert Jacob. He said the authority had thoroughly examined the Mangles Bay proposal at the highest level of assessment and has recommended approval subject to a suite of strict conditions to protect the area's environmental values. Environment Minister Albert Jacob declined an interview but offered this statement.
The EPA has recommended approval for a marina at Mangles Bay in Rockingham with 11 strict environmental conditions. It is currently out to a 2-week period of public appeal closing the 13th of May. It would be inappropriate to make any further comment while that process is ongoing.
There's some huge environmental issues that have not been addressed by the proponents. That is mainly because they wrote the environmental impact assessment issue documents. They were the ones who decided which issues they were going to look at and which ones they weren't, and it's now been left up to the public to raise the environmental issues that have not been looked at.
The appeals process closes on Monday. We have a princely 2 weeks to respond to something that the EPA has had more than a year to deal with.
We're taking great encouragement from the EPA's decision to recommend the project for conditional approval. That says to me that the environmental impacts are being managed and will be managed, and certainly Cedar Woods is very keen to deliver a good outcome here, both for the environment and for the community.
We need to get people to put in appeals to the Environmental Protection Authority's conditional approval. That's just a matter of going onto the Environmental Protection Authority website and making a submission against their decision.
One of the things we're really excited about is moving through the environmental approvals, and obviously we're not there yet, and getting into the planning phase.
The outcome is imminent. Point Perrin's final fate will soon rest with the state, then Commonwealth Government.
I'm Melissa Gurney for Undercurrent.
Well, I think that Roe Highway is an absolute brilliant invention that saves me heaps of time. But plans to extend it are causing rumbles of discontent. Tom and Maskanowski has more.
Much contention exists over the proposed Row 8 extension. Both proposals for the highway run through the Belia wetlands, which include the North Lake and Bibra Lake nature reserves. The Environmental Protection Authority, or EPA, has come out against the proposed development, citing the need for conservation in the region. The Belia wetlands include more than 220 plant species and 123 bird species. Among the birds that reside here is the Carnaby's black cockatoo, an animal that is already endangered. The wetlands are also one of the state's most significant Aboriginal historical sites. Around the perimeter of North and Bibra Lakes, there have been archaeologically significant findings that could add insight into the wetlands' pre-colonial heritage. As debate over the Row extension rages, issues of unprecedented road congestion will need to be weighed against the cost to Perth's environment and culture.
The wetlands are one of the most biodiverse environments we have because they're seasonally terrestrial and aquatic. So they dry out in summer and they attract a different lot of species. They attract migratory birds. And because they change seasonally, they have a greater diversity of species. I mean, at the moment it's a very peaceful, quiet place where people can walk, take their dogs, have picnics, ride their bikes or whatever. I mean, try doing that alongside of a highway or a freeway. We've got a road running through that. Yeah, it's just totally not a peaceful nature experience. It's a walk alongside a really busy, noisy road.
There is a history of controversy over development of the Belia area. This footage is from a heated community protest in 1984. The action was against the construction of Farrington Road through the wetlands. Years later, when the Row 8 extension was put on the agenda, it was met with similar grievances. Last decade's Carpenter government had considered building Row Highway Stage 8. They eventually scrapped these plans amidst claims it would do little to improve freight truck networks and that there were viable alternatives.
With our population growing as it is, I think it's 1,000 new people every week, you know, our infrastructure is run down. We need to put more money into public transport, to actually taking people off roads, and I think with $700 million you could do a lot more.
We have seen with the Southwest Highway how that works very well through environmental areas, that we can see that busy roads such as Row Highway will become can coexist with the environment and wetlands in particular.
It will have a devastating impact, and also because the science isn't even in on the hydrology of this wetland suite. Even the proponents, the main roads themselves, say they don't know what the effect will be on the hydrology.
State government, of course, will be looking for a dollar for dollar funding with federal government. I understand that the federal Liberals, if they come into power, are going to support it. My discussions already with federal Labor and representatives of the minister indicate that if they had been asked to provide that funding, they would have also looked very seriously at it, because they also see the very important, the great importance of the construction of Row Highway extension.
The EPA is preparing to release its latest assessment of the Row 8 extension's viability. Its decision will be made public by October of this year. In the meantime, debate over the Row Highway development continues. This is Thomas Marcinkovsky, reporting for Undercurrent.
Well, this week the CEC have a story pretty close to home. It's about the crises being faced by our farmers in the wheat belt.
Welcome back to the CEC report. The CEC leads the fight to save Western Australia's farmers from the banks. The plight of the farmers in the eastern wheat belt, Craig, of Western Australia is dire. We've talked about this the last 2 weeks in a row. The more news comes out, the worse it gets. Basically, as of right now, as many as 1,200 farmers could be forced off the land within weeks because the banks are withholding credit en masse. And it's within weeks because it's planting season now.
Don't you love it, Robbie, that the banks are now dictating policy for the Australians? That this is pure banking policy directing what happens to Australian farmers?
Well, actually, I don't love it, Craig, but you're right. That's exactly, it's transparent.
Right? That's the point, is that where's the sovereign government here? Why aren't governments acting in the interests of the farmers and not in the interests of the banks?
Well, and on that, the state government of Western Australia was asked by the farmers, look, we need $100 million in credit to alleviate the debt burden. The debt burden is $12 billion is shared by 4,300 farmers over there. That's their debt, $12 billion. They're paying between 9 and 12% interest on that debt. That means $1.5 billion is coming out of the wheat belt every year in interest alone. The farmers said, look, if we can't plant this crop this year, and by the way, it's looking like it could be a good season, the rain's coming at the right time for the planting, etc. If we can't plant this crop this year, this is our last chance. So on cue, the farmers said, no, the bankers have said, oh, well, we're not going to give you money.
Genocide, Robbie. There's only one word for it.
But in terms of dictating to them, before the state government announced its package to assist, which ended up being an offer of $20,000 for farmers who want to leave the land, so the state government is helping them off the farms, the state government met with the banks first to decide what that policy will be.
It just underlines the fact that the banks, the political parties are subservient to the bank.
All the talk over there is about which farmers are viable. So that's what they talk about. The question is, will Australia remain viable as a nation if we keep destroying our food producers?
Robbie, we've said many times in our publications, we've said many times on this show, the intention of the financial oligarchy through the British Crown is population reduction from 7 billion down to 1 billion people. This policy is part of that policy, and people need to understand that this is a genocidal policy. If a government reacts on that basis, you could easily save 1,200 farmers, and you could come up with schemes, as has been done before, in order that their produce is actually used for the benefit of all mankind, particularly in a situation when you have a global food shortage.
Well, we're putting out a statement today, Craig, headline, the government guaranteed the banks, so guarantee WA's wheat growers now, because in 2008, when it was the banks who had no credit from their international lenders, they were about to go bankrupt. The federal government stepped in and not only guaranteed those banks so they could borrow, they gave them their AAA credit rating to borrow with, so the banks were able to borrow very, very cheaply. That was 2008. So what's more important? Banks in trouble or a cornerstone of the world's food supply? That's what the WA wheat growers are. Most of that wheat is exported for the world food trade. They're a cornerstone of it. The government, if the government show it can do that, it can immediately step in with a similar type of thing. They don't have to set up any institution or anything. Step in and allow the farmers to borrow through them on their AAA credit rating to finance this year's crop and get that debt off their back. There's no excuse for any farmer to be forced off the land in the next few weeks.
Robbie, bankers live in tall buildings. They don't have to put up with no rain or plenty of rain, drought or flood. Right? They don't have to worry about high interest rates because they create them. They don't have to worry about export markets that are governed by cartels. Right? So here you are saying the government stepped in and protected these banks, but with the farmers who are subject to all these other real parameters, we won't look after them. I mean, this is a stinking policy, and it's a policy of genocide, pure and simple, on behalf of the British financial system to destroy our nation through our food producing capacity.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. Certainly hope you have enjoyed yourself. It's been a pleasure having your company as always. My name is Christy Molliker, and we can't wait to see you again next week for more of Western Australia's very own Undercurrent.
Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.